Welcome to our Watch App course from Eduionics. My name is Brett, and we're going to see how to capture data from a table row selection and transition with that data into another scene. So I'm going to go into our storyboard. We need another scene, and I am going to add an interface controller right next to this one. So this is going to be like a detail controller, and I'm going to click on the interface controller icon and give it a name. So this will be detail view, and I am going to click on our label from our table view controller and control drag over into the detail view. This will be a push. You could do a modal, and in that case it just pops up, and then there's no transition over to this one where you have a navigation that you can go back to at the top. And what we also want is to add a label. So we're going to set this label using the data that gets carried over. So in order to do that, we actually need a class associated to the detail view, which we don't have right now. And if I go into the identity inspector, it's just using this default class, which is not a class we can place code into. So I'm going to right click and new file and go to WatchKit class, and we have an interface controller, which is exactly what we need. I'm just going to call it detail interface controller and create. I'll drag this up to meet our other controllers, and then we can bring in our assistant editor. So I'm going to go into the storyboard. Actually, I need to go ahead and, before we do that, link this class up. So this is the detail interface controller class, and then I'll bring in the assistant editor. And for this label, this is what we're going to associate into our detail interface controller. So I'll control drag and create the IB outlet. I'll just call it main label. Now back in our table view class, over here, we are going to add another method. And this method is going to be a context for segue. There's 4 here. We're going to choose the one with the WK interface table so we can get our row index. The way this is going to work is we've got in here the row index that we can get the particular item out of our array, and then we need to return, because this is returning any object. And it's using this context. So once we get over to the detail view, that context is associated with this awake with context. So this context object here, which is also any object. So what it means is, if you have a class, if you have a string, an integer, you can pass all of that in. Then on the other side, whoever's receiving it will need to do some casting to get the particular object back. So if we go to our table controller, we can go ahead and fill that out, and then we'll see how to cast back. So I'm going to do a return, and we have our stadium list that uses the row index. Now in our detail view, I am going to assign it to our label. So we have set text, and in here we have context as string. So here you might do a little bit more work and build up your casting right above, create a variable for a new class, and then whatever it is on that class you want to drop into this label, you would do it there. For us though, it's quite simple right now because we don't have such an involved transition of data with the objects we're using. They're just strings. So I'm going to let Xcode go ahead and do a forced unwrap, although I don't know if that's what it wants to settle on. So now it's wanting to use an optional to do the downcast, and I will do that. By downcast, what it's saying is that this right here is any object. So that's kind of like the super object, where we can put in a custom class, we can put in primitives such as strings or integers or booleans. So to cast from context, which is any object, to a string, you're actually going down the line. You're getting to more of a primitive type. But if I were trying to cast from a string to any object, I'd be going more up to a complex object. So that's how the casting down versus casting up works. Okay, so we have our context on this side, we have it on the other side. We can go ahead and give this a run and see what happens. So all we should end up with is our text in the detail view. And if I click on table view, then Angel Stadium, there it is. And Chase Field, there it is. So obviously if these were more complex objects, you might have images, other things in here that would get filled in whenever your class comes across right here. And then you could set labels and images, build up that detail view to whatever you might want using more complex objects. So that is how to capture data from a table row click and transition into another scene with that data.